This is a very common and frequently asked question in interviews. What are the variety ways of passing information between functions? So although the question may be asked directly, that is, okay, what is pass-by value and what is pass-by reference? When do you use pass-by value and when should not you use the pass-by value? And what is pass-by reference? When you pass an object to a function, will the object be copied or will the object be shared? Right? And when can you pass an object that is immutable by reference? Well, so variety of questions are surrounded around this topic. Let us dive in and see how it works and how well we understand it. Using pass by value as a default way of passing parameters to functions. I'll go ahead and write int function, and then you are passing another integer variable, right? Int a. And in definition, what you wanted to do is you increment a by 1 and then return. Well, this is the functionality. And now from your application, you wanted to use function, and then you have a local variable called int value is equals to 10, and then you call the function fun the value, and then store this value in another integer. Print what would be the output of b. See, what are we doing here? We have a method that is taking an integer as a parameter, and then it is taking as a value. How do we say that it is taking a value, and how do we know that we are passing it by value? When you just pass the variable name as is, then it is passed by value. When you prefix it with ampersand, that means you are passing it by reference, passing it by its address. Alright, so that's the significant difference which you can easily identify by looking at the signature of the function. Now here, so what is happening, you are sending value, and when the value comes here, it is stored in this function's local memory as a is equals to 10, and whereas value is local to the main method which has value as 10. Now you increment it here, right? You increment it here, which will become 11, and now you return 11 as this supports an integer return type. Now b holds 11, value continue to be same as 10. You see the difference, right? So whereas the same thing, if you pass ampersand, right? So if you change this and prefix it with ampersand, now not just the value of b, now if you print value here, now this would be 11, not 10 anymore, because you passed it by address. And here when you pass it by address, can you receive it with just a plain variable? No, you should receive it with a pointer, and you should also increment the value with a pointer. And now since this integer is a pointer, you might not want to return a, because this a returns the address, so therefore you should return the star a, that is the value at a. Now your b holds 11, and as well as your value holds 11. So when you are passing by value, what is going to happen? Let's say you have a constant value, well, that is constant member, that is you have const int a is equals to 10, and when you pass this by value, that is you are calling the function fun and a, and your definition, as you have seen in the previous example, is modifying it. Does it have any impact on this? So you declared a to be immutable, right? So you don't want it to be changed. This shouldn't be changed, this we don't want it to be changed, and therefore you declared it with const keyword. And you can pass it as a function, though the compiler shows a warning saying that this is a const and the other side is a other side, the receiving end is not. So therefore it might complain a warning or it might throw an error depending on the compiler that you are using. So this is fine. But when you pass the same thing by reference, let's say now I call it fun ampersand a. Well, so still I do not want it to be changed. I want to keep this variable a as immutable, and yet here now you receive a new function. Let's write fun int star b. Now if you change it, right, what happens? So what did you declare here? You declared the variable as immutable, I mean the a member as immutable, and whereas you are not dealing with the data, you are passing the address of it, and you are receiving a pointer, and then you are incrementing the value. When you increment the value, that is when the immutability comes into picture, and this doesn't allow you to change it. So you should be careful about when do you pass it by value and when do you pass it by reference. So pass it by value, you can do it when you don't want to change your data at local place. That is, in a calling function, you want to pass the value to the other function so that they can make use of it. But you don't want to reflect the changes in the calling function. That is when you go for pass by value. And then, so when you have constant declared, you can pass it, but you cannot, whatever you change in the function, the callee, does not reflect here, and so your immutability is maintained when you pass it by value. And as you now identified that only the copy of the data is sent, that is, be it a primitive data type, be it a derived data type, or the abstract data type, your object gets copied but not shared. So whereas when you use pass by reference, your object is shared with the callee function, right? So your object, whatever you modify in the callee function, will get reflected in the caller function. So you should be very careful whom do you want to allow it to be modified. So especially when you are sharing your library, right? So the same library can be used by multiple teams under one project, and if the instantiation of the object is common, then you should be really careful about where is it being changed, who is changing it, and are you tracking it or not, how many times the variable, the data member has been changed. So there is a counter that you need to keep check on. So there are so many things come into the picture which makes a developer to be careful when you are passing it by reference, and only pass it by reference when it is mutable, that is when you want to change it by someone else. So this is a very frequently commonly asked question in interviews. Pass by value and reference with a simple example. So I have two functions, pass by value, which returns void and takes an argument. What it does is that it's incrementing b by 1 and then printing it here, and then pass by reference function, which takes a pointer and increments the pointer by 1 and printing it here. Now how do I make use out of in my application? So I have a local variable a is equals to 10, and so when I print it, it should be 10, right? And then I'm calling a method, the function pass by value a. So when I pass it, it creates its own local variable here. Now it becomes 11. When you print this value, it should print 11, and then when you come back and print pass by value after calling the method, it should still print the value of a, which is 10 in this case. So although the function changed it, it didn't reflect in the calling function, that is the caller. Now I pass by reference. So I pass the address of a and I receive it via pointer and increment the value at pointer by 1 and then print it here. So when I print it here, it should be 11, and when I come back and print it here, the value of a, it should still be 11. So it should be modified, right? So let me go ahead and run it. It's running, and if you see here, right, so before calling 10 and inside the pass by value 11, and then after calling it's still 10, so it didn't reflect in the calling function, the caller, right? And then pass by value inside the function 11, and even when you come back to main, right? It is still 11. So that's how the calling by value and calling by reference or the address, matters. Particularly about the cost of pass by value and pass by reference. These three statements should help you answer the question. So when do you use pass by value? Pass small values by value and larger ones by reference. What do we mean by that? Because when you pass an object or a value that is heavier, so what you are doing is you are increasing the memory footprint of your application. Right? So, and you might ask, what if the callee changes when I pass it by reference? Yes, that is when you go ahead and declare it as constant, so that the callee function will only make use of what you are sending, but it cannot modify accidentally or intentionally. So use pass by value when you are dealing with smaller value sizes and smaller sizes of objects, and when you are dealing with larger ones, yes, use it const point the pass by reference, and use default arguments for simpler way of passing information, right? So if you don't want to pass explicitly, use default arguments so that it helps you to save your cost. Alright, so these are quick answers for the cost associated questions in relation to pass by value and pass by reference. Experiment with immutability. Now what if I change this integer declaration to a constant, right? So which I mean that this int a should not be modified within the scope of this function. So when I use constant, my intention is to make it immutable. Nobody should modify it. Now what am I doing here? Pass by value a, I am sending it, right? So you're receiving it here and modifying it here. This doesn't affect the main methods a. So it should be okay. Now when it comes to the reference, we already start to see the compiler highlighting it. You see that. So argument of type const int star is incompatible with parameter type int star. Okay, so that makes sense because we declared here as a int star, but now we are passing const int star. So let's go ahead and say const int star b. Now what happens? So it pops up another error message now. So expression must be modifiable L value, the left hand side value. Now what we are doing here is when you declare it constant and you are trying to modify it, so the compiler itself is denying you from doing that. So that is the advantage of declaring something as constant to make it immutable. So accidentally you wouldn't pass this as reference, so that no other function can affect the caller method or caller function's intentions. Alright, so that demonstrates. Now even if you run, it cannot, because there is an error. So read only variable is not assignable. Okay, expression must be a modifiable L value, so you can't do it. So even if you remove it here, there is a compilation error. So it is good if you want to make an object immutable or a particular value immutable, then you should declare it as a constant. Alright, so that completes the demonstration of pass by value and pass by reference.